Hi everyone, this video is all about accordion books. I absolutely love them. They're quick, they're easy, they're fun to make, and they're also really fun to use. I use them for my sketching and my watercolor books and journals, but there are certainly more uses than that. You could glue photos onto them and flip through like that, or you could use them for any other medium you like acrylics, inks, colored pencils, or whatever. When you're making these books, you can make the pages any size you want, such as these smaller ones, these larger ones, and you can make them any length you want. Example right there. You can just keep adding sections as you go. Once you have made and used an accordion book, I can almost guarantee you will be hooked. Okay, to make an accordion book, you're going to need some simple supplies. This is a very basic supply list. You'll need some sort of paper, which in my case is watercolor paper, but you could use any kind of paper you want, depending upon the medium you're working with. You'll need some sort of glue, which for me, I used to use rubber cement. I use more of the tacky glue or the Elmer's glue now, because in the heat in Arizona, these can tend over a time to dry out and separate the pages. So some sort of glue, and then a way to cut the paper, which is either with a ruler and a scissor or with rotary tools, which I am lucky to have from my quilting ventures. And that would be a rotary mat, rotary ruler, and a rotary cutter. The first thing we're going to talk about is the paper we're going to use. I use this watercolor paper because that's just the medium I work in. And no matter what you use, this is going to be your finished looking product, where you're piecing together all of these pages that start like this. And what I've done for myself is I've made a handy little chart here regarding these 3 different sizes of watercolor books. And this way I know that once I cut them and fold them, if I need something tiny, I'll look at my chart and see, like if I use this paper, they'll end up 5 by 5 1/4. This will end up 4 by 4 1/2. This one will end up with a 3 by 3 like this. So I do that and then choose which paper that I'm going to be using. This will make a lot of sense once we get these made. I also wanted to say something a little more about the paper that you use for making these accordion books. It needs to be something that will be a little sturdy, that will stand up to folding them. Otherwise it's just going to collapse if you use something like typing paper or notebook paper or whatever you want to call it. This right here is an example of 2 different types of cardstock. It's a little heftier, and that would be something that you could use. This is the chart I talked about when cutting my paper for my accordion books. Because I use watercolor paper, I buy them in books, and I showed you those earlier, and they come in particular sizes. And in order to get the most use out of the paper that I can, these are just the measurements that I came up with, but this will give you a closer view of how I charted that. I also wanted to say that I am very well aware that by gluing these sections together as we have done, there is waste. Because it's back-to-back glued, there are sections that won't be able to be used. I understand that that is wasteful, and yes, that bothers me to some degree, but I feel like the benefits of an accordion book outweigh that waste of paper. The benefits for me are that I can make this as big as I want, as small as I want, the sizes of pages that I want, and I can adjust it to anything I want to do. So that, for me, far outweighs the little bit of waste I'm going to have with the paper. Okay, cutting our paper. The first thing I'm going to do is remove a page from this watercolor book, set aside the book, and this one is from a 9 by 12 book. And this one, according to my little chart right here, here's my 9 by 12, I can get 3-inch book pages out of this, which would be something like this. You're going to end up with tiny little pages. Now what I'm going to do, according to my little chart, and you can make one up, or you can just, I don't know, get this memorized or whatever you have to do to figure out what size you're doing. But I'm going to start with this 9 by 12 sheet and I'm going to cut three 3-inch wide sections. So there, and then I'm going to cut another 3-inch wide section. And if you don't have rotary cutters, just draw it out with a pencil and cut it with a scissor the old-fashioned way. So all 3 of these pieces are 3 inches wide. Next is looking at my little chart here. I want 3 by 3 inch pages, which would be for this tiny little book. So I've got my 3-inch strip cut, and now in order to make these, because this is 12 inches long, this will be 4 sections. The first thing I'm going to do is fold this one in half. I just use my fingernail to start, and then just whatever will make this, you know, like the edge of a scissor, anything like that, just you want that to be nice and sharp. Okay, now you've got a piece that looks like this, and in order for this to be now an accordion, I've got to fold this back. So I'm now going to fold this back to the fold, do that, smash it down nice and tight, something smooth that's not gonna leave marks. So now I have that, and then in order to make the last piece, I've got to fold that back to the other fold. Now, this same principle applies no matter what paper, what size paper I should say, that you are using. The same principle. You want that to go back and forth and back and forth. So there you have a section. Now, I'm going to do that again for this section, and we will end up with 2 sections for our book. So there, now you have 2 sections for your book. It's starting to be clearer, isn't it? So now you take the 2 sections, you flip this however you have to connect like that, and now you've got this longer piece, and on and on and on. You can keep doing this and doing this however long you want to. Now, of course, when you've got that slipped over into there, you need to glue these 2 pieces together. I mean, that becomes, I think, very obvious. Glue it together, put a stack of books on top of it or something so it really adheres well, and then that will be attached to that, and you can see how you just keep going and going and going. Now, if you wanted to make these in a, let's say you're dividing up the 12, if you want this in a 3 by, here's my chart. Let's say instead of 3 by 3, which these are, let's say I want them 3 by 4. So I do this. I'm going to fold on, oh, excuse me, on 4. That will give me, as you can see, that's 1. And then this will give me 3 by 4. So now you have more of a landscape. On this other one right here that we did, these are little squares that you can work with. But if you prefer, for whatever reason, to work with a 3 by 4, it's the same principle. And you just keep cutting these and adding these, and again, just gluing them together, and you end up with your book. So once you've glued all of these together and you have your book as long as you want, or as short as you want, or the size you want, then you have now a book ready for whatever medium you use. Again, I use watercolor, and you can see how, you can look at the lengths of these, shorter and longer, and these pages are smaller. These are pretty much the same size. Yep, they are. And there you go. That's all there is to this. They are extremely simple, and I find them to be addictive. I wanted to say also that we talked just a speck about other ways you could use an accordion book other than the way I do, which is for my watercolors. I talked about different mediums you could use colored pencil, etc., etc. And another thing I thought of was that if you were to glue photos, these are old photos from my brother and I, and if you were to glue photos on that, it would make a great display of photographs. And the nice thing about them, if they were glued on there, is that you could set it upright, such as this, and view the photos from any direction. Also, along that line, I wanted to say that if you used the landscape portion, you can always, and this would include both photographs or drawings or watercolors or whatever you're using it for, you could have it, although it's set up to be like landscape this way, if you have a lot of photos or drawings that you're using this way, you could turn them that way also. Those are just kind of a couple of suggestions for other uses than just the watercolor that I do. So now that you know how to make these books, you don't have any excuse for not doing them. I fell in love with these years ago, and I just keep making them and making them and making them, and they end up being extremely cheap to do, frugal, whatever the word is, and I use them for all sorts of things. So there you go, and below you'll find some links to my video tours of my accordion books.